I'm Jacob.
And I'm Christian. And today we're going to talk about temptation and how to deal with it.
You know, I'm pretty good at resisting temptation. Except my phone. I think I use my phone a little bit too much.
It's very common. For me, it's ketchup chips. I don't know where you're from, but here in Canada, we have ketchup chips and they are so good. And sometimes I just finish a whole bag. You know?
It's okay. We all have a snack food I think we struggle with. But today, we're gonna look at what Jesus did to resist temptation. And you'll see, he demonstrated a crazy amount of self-control. Check it out.
Hello friends, welcome to my coffee shop. My name is Aaron and this is Fun Coffee Facts with Aaron. Did you know the most expensive coffee in the world is about $500 per kilogram and it is made out of cat poop? Delicious. Hey everyone, it is great to be back with you. I'm Aaron. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I love movie popcorn. Like, to the extent it is my favorite thing. I go to movies sometimes just to have popcorn. But movie popcorn kind of makes me feel gross afterwards. And every time I go, my wife reminds me, she says, Aaron, don't eat the movie popcorn, you will feel gross. You're just not gonna enjoy it. But every time, I still do it, knowing that I'm going to feel gross after the movie. Now, movie popcorn might not be the biggest or the worst temptation, but throughout life, we're always being tempted, every single one of us. And that brings us to today's big idea, which is Jesus shows us how to resist temptation. So we're in this series called Follow because we want to learn to follow Jesus. He already shows us that he is the example, that we're to follow his teachings, and that is the best way for us. So when we look at Jesus' life as an example, we're actually today going to look at time when he resisted temptation. Now you and I might have smaller temptations. Maybe we want to avoid pushing our annoying sibling or eating sugary snacks or popcorn for me, whatever it might be. But these temptations that Jesus is about to encounter, these are big deal temptations. So we're in Matthew 4. Now Jesus had just finished being baptized. If you remember from last week, we talked about that. And now Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to kind of fast and focus on what's to come in his ministry. So 40 days and 40 nights without food. Can you imagine how hungry you'd be? The whole situation is primed for the devil to come tempt Jesus. So let's read what happens. During that time, the devil came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus told him, "No, the scripture says people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." So that's the first temptation that Jesus encounters. He is starving and the devil tempts him with food. But Jesus knows that it is not good, that it's a temptation, so he resists. Not only does Jesus resist this temptation, but the first thing he says is scripture. He has this memorized and he's so in scripture that that's the first thing that comes out of his mouth. So the devil says, I'm gonna hit Jesus up with a second temptation. Let's read what happens. Then the devil took him to the holy city, Jerusalem, to the highest point of the temple, and said, "If you are the Son of God, jump off. For the scripture says, he will order his angels to protect you, and they will hold you up with their hands so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone." Jesus responded, "The scriptures also say, you must not test the Lord your God." What's really interesting about this story is that the devil is using scripture. He's twisting it. It's not meant to be a temptation, but he is still using scripture, so it sounds kind of right. This sometimes shows us that people can say what sounds right. They can even use scripture, but they're twisting it in a way that it's not meant to, or it's not the truth. The devil started that one. But again, we see that Jesus is so into scripture that he responds with more scripture. So temptation 2 fails. And now we're on to number 3. So he takes Jesus to this high mountain and he shows him all the kingdoms, everything, and he says, "This will all be yours if you just kneel down and worship me." I have no idea if I would be able to resist that, but Jesus does. And he says, "Get out of here, Satan. For scripture says, you are only to worship the Lord your God." 3 temptations up, 3 times that Jesus wins. So the devil says this isn't gonna work and he leaves Jesus alone. Now these are 3 temptations that we're gonna look a little bit closer at because they're very similar to things that we could possibly encounter today. See, in the first temptation, the devil tempts Jesus with food, with his needs, with what he wants, but it's not the right way to fulfill those needs. Then the second temptation was pride. The devil wanted Jesus to show that he was who he was, but in a kind of a reckless way. And lastly, the devil tempted Jesus with power, but in a way that would make Jesus abandon everything that he stood for. All 3 temptations would have been very difficult to pass up, but Jesus resisted all 3. So that's 3 temptations that would be very tempting for Jesus and very tempting for you and I. Jesus resisted him, and then the devil left him and the angels took care of him. Honestly, the devil can be very sneaky with how he tempts us. Maybe it's just that little voice in your ear to tell a small little lie, or maybe you see something and nobody's watching and you can slip it into your pocket. Maybe it's to go on a website that you know you shouldn't be on. Perhaps it's, you know what, you're gonna watch this movie that you know you shouldn't watch. Whatever your temptations are, they're probably different than mine, but we can still resist them. We need to learn how to resist them to follow Jesus more in his loving way. And not only that, Jesus kind of gives us a game plan. What he says is, I want you to learn scripture. I want you to know scripture so well that you can respond to it, that you can use it as a power and a source to resist temptation. See, Jesus responds with scripture. He trusts scripture. He knows scripture. He studies it. He takes it to heart. If he does that, we should do that too. And as we do this, I want to be clear. It's not going to say that temptation isn't going to come. It still is. But scripture will help us to resist it. Now, this is something that I'm still working on. I'm sure it's something you're also still working on. The point is that we can work on this all together. That's all we have for this week. It's been great hanging out. See you later.
Jesus went without food for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. I wouldn't be able to skip one meal without being hungry or grumpy. Never mind resist bread or ketchup chips.
Totally. When we're hungry or tired or in any other state of weakness, it's easier for us to focus on our wants rather than our needs. But Jesus knew this, and he knew that putting his focus in scripture would give him strength and that it would put things in the right perspective.
Yeah. We asked a bunch of people to share about what they find hard to resist and how they deal with temptation. Let's watch this.
I asked a few friends what they struggled to say no to and how they practice self-control.
My phone. I have a hard time saying no to my phone, and chocolate.
I used to work in a restaurant. Sometimes people are just really rude, and so it's really easy to want to be quick to say something back. It's a lot easier to react in anger than it is to take a second and pause and reflect on what the right answer is.
I love hanging out with my friends. I do it all the time, every weekend. And sometimes that's hard to say no to when I have other priorities that need to get done. I think for me, it's like, here's a reward at the end. So instead of being like friends first, I'm like, okay, get your homework done, then you can hang out with your friends.
I get FOMO, so for me, it's difficult to say no to an ask of being somewhere or being with a group of people. I think ultimately it's learning what I need to do versus what I want to do.
Well, just, trying to go to bed at a reasonable time or trying not to say no to people when they're trying to ask me for help.
The tough part is the fact that, you're in bed, you're all warm, you don't really want to get up. I motivate myself by just saying, you have to do this, you got to get out of bed. Getting out of bed is going to put you far in life, especially if you're going to school and getting a good education for it.
Well, I'm a swimmer and I go out swimming around 8, 9 o'clock at night. My motivation is for my lane mates, my friends who are going to be there, my coach, and it's fun, it's a lot of fitness, and it's friendship.
What time I should go to bed. Yeah, like turning the TV off or like actually heading upstairs to get into bed at an earlier time, because I know the morning comes around and then I have a hard time waking up.
My friend might ask me, like, hey, do you want to come over and watch a movie? I might be like, I have homework to do and I don't have time to watch this movie, but I feel bad for saying no, right? So if I say no that day, then I'll be like, but I can do it next week.
Sometimes I find it hard to say no to
partaking in conversations of gossip because I don't want to feel excluded from any conversation, but I know it's also not good and it's not good conversation.
I find it hard to get up off the couch sometimes, and I know for my body that I need to exercise. Whenever possible, I'd like to have a workout buddy. It's harder to say no to somebody because I'm afraid I'm going to let them down. So sometimes I can be there to motivate my buddy to go out and exercise, and when I'm not having a good day, I'm having a lazy day, my buddy can help me.
When it comes to things, the first thing that I always ask myself is this going to benefit more than just myself? Is it going to benefit the ones that I love, like my immediate family? And then from a Christian point of view, is it going to honor God? Those are the two big questions that I ask myself.
It's interesting. Some people have difficulty getting out of bed in the morning, whereas other people struggle to overcome tasty snacks and good food.
Yeah, that's totally me. I have trouble saying no to any good food.
And we learned some good tips from our friends in the video too. And then, of course, we can look at Jesus and how he led that example of know the truth, know scripture, and use that to overcome temptation.
I like that. Well, let's break into our small groups and see how this looks in our own lives.